The very moment India gained independence in 1947, a silent, high-stakes battle was already brewing. I mean, while the rest of the world just saw a newly free nation, a massive game of espionage designed to completely fracture the subcontinent was kicking off right behind the scenes. In this explainer, we're going to map out exactly how three major intelligence heavyweights, India's RAW, Pakistan's ISI, and America's CIA, got locked into one of the most intense, multi-front, covert conflicts in modern history. Now, right at the starting line, RAW was the ultimate underdog. Think about it. Pakistan's ISI was established right after the 1948 war by a British World War II veteran, Major General Cawthorne. They had this massive head start, right? 10,000 officials, elite psychological and military training straight from British agencies like MI5 and MI6. Meanwhile, India's RAW didn't even exist until 20 years later. It was finally born out of pure necessity, put together by R.N. Kaul with just 250 rookies, scraping by in an abandoned theater. To really understand this war, we absolutely have to look at the ISI's infamous core doctrine, which was to bleed India from the inside out. General Zia-ul-Haq actually summarized this game plan perfectly. See, Pakistan knew they couldn't defeat an adversary 4 times their size in an outright conventional war. That just wasn't going to happen. So instead, their strategy was to exploit internal fault lines, fund insurgencies, and create these constant, exhausting internal pressure points.
All right, so let's get into part 1. The silent war begins.
Early on, Pakistan treated local insurgents essentially as pawns, which forced India to turn its own northeast into a highly militarized zone way before RAW was even a thing. The ISI pinpointed the unrest among the Naga and Mizo communities and just swooped in. They set up training camps right across the border in the jungles of East Pakistan, and we're not talking about small-scale support here. They handed over highly sophisticated weapons like machine guns and rocket launchers to these separatist groups. It actually sparked a massive crisis that led to the Mizo National Front briefly taking complete control of Mizoram back in 1966. Then, in 1965, the ISI launched Operation Gibraltar. The goal here was to incite a widespread civilian rebellion in Kashmir by sneaking in trained soldiers completely disguised as locals. But here's the twist. It completely backfired. The local Kashmiris totally rejected this infiltration and actually tipped off the Indian forces instead. So the operation collapsed, ultimately triggering the 1965 Indo-Pak War. Now, on paper, India successfully repelled the attack, right? But fighting totally blind against international threats exposed a terrifying reality. India's Internal Intelligence Bureau was just completely unequipped for external dangers.
Which brings us to part 2, and a major turning point, the rise of RAW. And they did not waste any time. Let's look at part 3, the 1971 masterstroke. Now, here's where things get like a spy thriller. Targeting Pakistan's biggest vulnerability, RAW actually acquired intelligence 2 whole years in advance that West Pakistan was planning a massive military crackdown against the Bengali-speaking population in East Pakistan. In a stroke of sheer strategic brilliance, RAW essentially used Pakistan's own plot against them to sever West Pakistan's air support before a war even officially began. They flipped an ISI asset, a guy named Hashim Qureshi, and turned him into a double agent. He hijacked an Indian Airlines flight, landed it in Lahore, and after all the passengers were safely let go, the plane was burned. This gave India the absolutely perfect international excuse to ban Pakistani flights over Indian airspace, totally isolating East Pakistan militarily. Throughout 1971, RAW was meticulously orchestrating this massive, multi-front attack. And it wasn't just with Indian forces. They had 16,000 mutinying Bengali Pakistani soldiers on their side. By training 3 distinct rebel forces, the Mukti, Mujib, and Qadir Bahini, deep in the jungles of the Sundarbans, RAW completely neutralized the Pakistani military in the east. They even cleverly routed the Mujib Bahini through Mizoram specifically to destroy the very ISI camps that had been funding India's northeast insurgencies. Talk about 2 birds with 1 stone. The result of all of this was just historic. We're talking about the surrender of 100,000 Pakistani soldiers. Let that sink in. That is literally the largest military surrender since World War II, and it directly birthed the new nation of Bangladesh. In a mere 14 days, this scrappy rookie intelligence agency had totally dismantled Pakistan's geography, cutting the nation in half right under the ISI's nose. But hold on, because the game was far from over. Let's move to part 4, the Ring of Fire. Deeply embarrassed by the 1971 loss, Pakistan found a powerful new friend. The global superpower itself, the United States, brought the CIA into the fold to back the ISI against RAW. And guys, this shadow war was about to get incredibly expensive. Fueled by $3 billion in CIA funding and armed with highly advanced Stinger missiles, the ISI helped overthrow the Afghan government, eventually installing the extremist Taliban regime. For India, this was a massive blow, meaning the loss of a historically crucial ally in the region.
By aggressively neutralizing India's allies and funneling cash into insurgencies, the CIA and ISI successfully trapped India in what geopolitical strategists call a ring of fire. In 1975, a military coup in Bangladesh led to the really tragic assassination of India's staunch ally, Sheikh Mujib. At the exact same time, they were funding rebel groups down in Sri Lanka and over in Myanmar. Basically, overnight, India woke up completely surrounded by anti-India governments and hostile insurgencies on literally every side.
And we have to talk about the devastating human cost of this encirclement. Operation Tupac alone led to an estimated 70,000 terror attacks, and the deeply tragic 1990 exodus of Kashmiri Pandits. See, with their own border secured by that ring of fire, the ISI could bring the war directly onto Indian soil. They birthed dozens of terror organizations, effectively turning the Kashmir Valley into a war zone and executing a horrific campaign that forced hundreds of thousands of Kashmiri Hindus to flee their ancestral homes just to survive.
To make matters worse, these militants were incredibly well-armed. I mean, possessing weapons like RPGs and AK-47s that even Indian forces largely lacked at the time. This highlights just how immense the internal pressure on India really was. Operation K2's goal was brutally simple: avenge the loss of East Pakistan by severing Kashmir and Punjab from India. Backed by an estimated $8 billion in CIA aid flowing to the ISI, militants violently occupied the Golden Temple in 1984. They were fortified with concrete bunkers and advanced weaponry, pushing India dangerously close to the brink of civil disorder.
So how do you even fight back against that? Well, let's look at Part 5, RAW's counterattack. Faced with this overwhelming multi-front war, RAW didn't just play defense. They aggressively flipped the script to dismantle the Ring of Fire. If the ISI and CIA were going to exploit India's internal vulnerabilities, RAW decided it was time to absolutely return the favor. In August 1988, the very mastermind of Operation Tupac, General Zia-ul-Haq, died when bombs hidden in mango crates brought down his plane. Yeah, mango crates. Now, officially it was ruled a crash, but both Zia's own son and the U.S. ambassador later claimed this was no accident. It was a highly calculated assassination by RAW, Mossad, and the KGB. By taking out the architect of Pakistan's covert war, along with a top U.S. official, RAW delivered a deafening message to both the ISI and the CIA.
RAW essentially ripped a page right out of the ISI's playbook by identifying Pakistan's biggest fault line in Balochistan and heavily funding the Baloch Liberation Army. The logic was clear. If Pakistan was going to fund separatism in Punjab and Kashmir, RAW was going to heavily fund the Baloch rebels. By establishing training camps and paying militant salaries directly in US dollars, RAW created this relentless, chaotic internal crisis for Pakistan that actually continues to bleed their resources to this very day. They also proved their insane capacity to execute rapid regime changes and counter-coups, successfully transforming that hostile ring of fire into a pro-India necklace of friendship. They backed the Northern Alliance to put major pressure on the Taliban in Afghanistan. They intervened in Nepal. They helped restore a pro-India government to power in Bangladesh in 1996. They even executed these lightning-fast military operations in the Maldives and Seychelles to stop anti-India coups dead in their tracks. At the same time, RAW's newly formed covert strike teams hit back so effectively that the ISI chief literally begged international mediators to make India stop. Team X and Team J began matching the ISI blow for blow, operating deep inside Pakistani territory. The retaliation was so intense, so precise, that the ISI, an agency famous for mastering asymmetric warfare, actually found itself pleading for relief. Which brings us to the final act of this explainer. Part 6, the ultimate wedge. In a final masterstroke that would permanently shatter the powerful alliance between the ISI and the CIA, the world changed forever on September 11, 2001. Following those devastating attacks, the United States was totally desperate to find the mastermind, Osama bin Laden, who, as we now know, was secretly being harbored by the ISI. The CIA had poured literally billions into Pakistan, trusting them as a vital ally in the war on terror, completely unaware that they were being played the entire time. RAW used sheer, undeniable intelligence to expose Pakistan's double game, turning the CIA against the very agency it had once funded.
RAW successfully tracked a known terrorist named Ilyas Kashmiri, acting as a courier, which ultimately uncovered bin Laden's exact location in Abbottabad. By quietly feeding this ultra-specific tip to the CIA, RAW didn't just help eliminate a global terrorist leader, they fundamentally destroyed the CIA-ISI partnership. America finally realized it had been funding its own enemy, leading directly to Pakistan being globally blacklisted by the FATF. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to reflect on the colossal human and economic toll of this ongoing geopolitical chess match. Decades of espionage, terror attacks, and regime changes have permanently altered South Asia. It's an uncomfortable reality that the massive consequences of this hidden war are still being felt by everyday people today. The board is still set, the pieces are still moving, and the real question is, how will the next move shape the future for billions of lives? Thanks for exploring this with me.